does my boss like my haircut, or like just you know what I mean, like
Yeah,
silly things like that.
I've been having those thoughts lately too, about just sort of how, like, especially with the stuff that my mom saved for me. She knew my love of geography and history, and it seems like I grew up in that sweet spot of well, not really the sweet spot. It's like the pre-technology and post-technology,
Hmm.
and having to sort of catch up and sort of jump on board, trying to keep on top of everything. It's practically impossible.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I have that same thought, and I was born mid '90s, and what's funny is, so I think of myself as like I was basically the last generation to have dial-up, and it's like, well, I mean, hey, that's still like leaps and bounds compared to like what was available in the
Yeah,
'80s, '70s, and '60s, and
yeah.
you look back then, and you're lucky if you had a fax machine even then. I'm sure, I have no idea actually how many people had fax machines then, but
I think my printer was able to receive faxes, but I needed a phone number associated with it.
right, so it's
Yeah.
probably the same thing with dial-up, where it's like, who the hell's on the phone? I'm
Yeah.
waiting for a fax. It's important. I only get one of these a week or a month or whatever.
I think we're in a unique. I have been talking about this with a number of people, like sort of seeing all the materials. I think we might have talked about this at the office sometimes, but seeing the amount of material that my mom saved and reading through it, and it's all local. It's like a snapshot of the Niagara region between 1954 and 2012.
Wow.
And it could be like a course unto itself, like either at the school board or like the ESPN or what have you, or even a college course or whatever. It's almost like it's almost like archaeology. Right? It's not digital.
Yeah.
It's all like old school stuff, and I don't want to, like, I want to share the stuff that I have. Like, I don't want to just because to me it's valuable. It's like it's nothing has changed in the Niagara Peninsula a lot in
Yeah.
terms of like same kind of planning issues, same kind of you know
Same shit, different day.
yeah, some things have moved along, like in terms of like just sort of journalistic standards, I call it, right? Like one of the things that sticks out in my head is there's a picture. I guess it's like a post fender bender or whatever, and there's a lady. She's sitting on the guardrail, just kind of composing herself, and the caption underneath the photo says "woman driver,"
Oh my
blah
god.
blah blah,
Yeah.
and you're like, that would never fly
Yeah.
now. So the themes of the stories are the same. It's just like sort of
Yeah.
the journalistic standards and sort of the viewpoints have changed.
Updated a lot. Yeah, like I can't imagine an article identifying someone by their. It's like the saying, like, yeah, by the way, this is their religion, or they were Amish, or
Yeah,
they were.
and it's part of like a traffic story. Like Amish couple. Well, I guess they wouldn't be driving a car.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Their horse hit a motor vehicle, a metal vehicle.
Yeah, I mean but having that information, I think I see an opportunity for you know because sort of like I was born in '69. You're 99, so
95.
95. So those generations of like my parents never had a computer. They never, they barely just touched the cell phone, and but they knew all of these, and all of like there's an entire sort of different viewpoint of what they were going through at those times of those articles, and I kind of one of my things too is I'm kind of working on a little bit of a book about the St. Catharines Kinsman baseball team when I was playing Little League when I was a kid. And the first game that I ever played uh, was like 5 days after the fall of Saigon. And all for me it was just I just wanted to play baseball. Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah. How like your
and
world fits
what
into the.
were my parents thinking of that?
Yeah.
Sort of as it's all sort of we're Canada, so it's kind of like sort of outside view, but nonetheless, it's very they had stresses on in their lives. I'm certain of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do we pay for baseball? How do we pay for two
Yeah. At the
boys,
same
right?
time, like Vietnam is
Yeah.
collapsing right now.
Yeah, and I've come to have like a little bit, just more of appreciation for sort of if I could apologize now,
Yeah.
to them face to face, I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, for all the little things in
Yeah.
the grand scheme.
And I just turned 53 not too long ago, and I was sitting out here in my new unit spot, thinking, what was my dad thinking when he turned 53? And going back in time, it was like 1988. He had just lost his job. Like the company that he worked for just closed and left,
Yeah.
and no pension, no nothing.
Yeah, what a whole nother reality.
And in 1988, I had just finished grade 13. So, and in the previous years to that, I was working summer jobs for him with him. And I thought, oh, finished grade 13, I'm just going to step into like a nice
the world's just
junior
beginning.
foreman position or something, or sort of like a higher paid laborer. And then it all went out the window. And it was like, okay, well, what do I do now? Because I never applied to college because I was just going to go work.
It's just crazy how, like, from one year to the next, like, doesn't matter how you are as a person, like, the opportunities around you can shape the rest of your life. Like, I just read that book, Outliers, and it talks about how a lot of the richest people who ever lived happen to be born within a certain era. And, like, you look at, it was like Bill Gates and a dozen other kind of Silicon Valley billionaires that were all born within, I think it was like 5 years of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this perfect time where they would have been just graduating high school or in early college years with the invention of like the personal computer or some sort of a computer that they were able to have access to. And just how a lot of stars have to align. I mean, you look at, like you said, the late 80s. That's when, I forget who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve at the time in the United States, but basically they had to fight the inflation that they were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to shoot interest rates up to ungodly levels. And
which is, when you look at the house, it's like built by hand, no mortgage ever
yeah,
on this
yeah,
house.
not
And, like,
needed back then.
so like my parents just, I'm thankful like every bloody day that this house has never had a mortgage on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at people nowadays, like, there's a lot of people I see who honestly are like almost joining up with a friend to get a mortgage, or people who probably maybe wouldn't have gotten that step in their relationship are now like, I need to buy a house, and in order to do that, I have to do this with this person I've been dating for maybe a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen some people in my age group who have literally like made that huge next step with someone because they need a cosigner, they need someone else.
It's like the 21st century version of going to school and you being the guy that buys the couch from the brick, and everybody says, "Oh yeah, we'll chip in with it for you."
Yeah, but now it's a house.
and then by the end of it, it's like you're stuck with like interest payments coming out of your wazoo.
Yeah. Oh my
because
gosh.
your friends told you they'd help you pay for it.
Yeah,
And
well,
now,
I've heard
like,
of.
now you're stuck with a couch.
Well, I've heard of stories like that where it's like, oh, we all pitched in to buy like an old '90s Honda Civic,
Mm-hmm.
but like, yeah, at least the Honda Civic, like, it's probably like, I don't know, I feel really bad if you're borrowing for a $3,000 Civic or whatever it might be, but yeah, no, it's definitely times have changed. And this one couple I'm thinking of, I think they've split, but because they had a mortgage together, they've had to stay together, or there was another person I know who they broke up, and it's like, well, because of, I guess, the times that it is now, because of their financial situations, the one person just had to say, all right, well, I don't want to live with this person, so I guess I just walk away and lose my, I don't even know, probably tens of thousands of dollars. Just see you later.
I can't even imagine it.
Yeah.
Like when I bought, when I got my first house, not like I've had more than two. This is like the second, and this one was already here. But the first one, I just even, we were discussing earlier, like this house cost like 13,000. It was under 14,000 to build between 1956 and 1960.
Well, money was definitely worth a lot more. I always like to think, how many cheeseburgers?
Well, that's still when you translate to today's dollars, it's still like $118,000.
Yeah, so it's still probably like a fifth of what this is now.
And so this was always the argument, not really an argument, discussion we'd always have. It's like, this house I don't even know what the estimated value of the house is, but it's a hell of a lot more than $118,000.
Yeah, North End St. Catharines, 2020.
And it's like when you factor in like the appreciated value of the house, even And I bought my first house in 2007, and I bought it for 109, and I sold it for 249. Like even, and it really it just didn't. It was like night and day. It seemed like, oh, I'm paying like 109,000. And then when I went to the bank to sort of figure out some stuff when I was moving in here, it was like to sell the house. It's like, oh yeah, 249. I'm like, are we talking about the same house?
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny. It's not like the house is any faster.
Yeah.
It's not like the house has a new chip and it's upgraded. Like
Yeah.
when it's like the dirt hasn't shifted, but the world around it has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm just getting to the point with this one that's I need to really do the maintenance, bring it up to speed on the maintenance and the renovations. I'm very nostalgic in that respect, and I just feel really bad about changing anything in the house, which is
Right.
probably why I built this, because
Yeah.
it's something I can
Yeah.
mess around with.
Yeah. You're not knocking down someone else's work.
Yeah, and that's what's really bugging me about, or gnawing on me about, doing renovations in the house and stuff like that.
Well, it's just
My dad, my dad would be like, "Do it, for God's sake."
Yeah. Yeah, but it's still so nostalgic. So at least it's probably a good start, really making these big strides to edit the backyard and then work your way in. No, this is pretty cool. Like, so Amish shed took about 2 years, you said, from ordering it to receiving it.
Yeah, year and a half.
It's, I mean, it's really cool. Like, I've wanted to build something like this. Like, I was telling you before, I was trying to get my friend to start getting into the world of carpentry because he was working in the kitchen, got laid off twice from 2 different COVID waves. They said, there's going to be a third wave. You may as well find work that you can do through all the sneezes and all the, hospitalizations and whatnot. So, built a chicken coop, built a shed, 8 foot by 8 foot. That literally is just like my storage container for the chicken food and all that now.
Oh, this is 8 by 10, so it's pretty much the same size. That'd be sort of 8 by. It'd be like more or less 8 by 7. Like without that end of the shed, the man shed piece is 8 by 7.
The great thing is, so anything less than 100 square feet, no building permit needed, nice and easy, and that's just for the inside area. Like, so this is like
It's technically not attached to it.
All right. For anyone from the St. Catharines Building Department watching, we are kosher, coming at us.
Yeah.
We'll be good.
Jesus.
Yeah, now they know which city I'm in. Yeah, you don't know where we are. I'm not going to geotag this video and put it on YouTube. But, well, yeah, and I guess just speaking of geotags in the world of geo, so would you call yourself a geography fanatic, expert, aficionado,
Not an expert.
lunatic?
Well, a lunatic.
But not about geography. That's just my sanity.
Geography is, kindergarten was like, I painted my first map in kindergarten. And, I can remember it as clear as day. Those like the little acrylic paints that came in like sort of like a tray of 6 or 8, and you put the water in there. And I was just drawing maps. Chris Hildebrand was on my right, Derek Upshaw was on my left. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And then, grade 4 and all that, I wanted to be an astronomer, but my math class were never high enough. And so I was really into that. And then it was really like grade 9 geography. My high school teacher, all my high school teachers, like my high school teachers all through high school for geography were really good. Mr. Polignano and Mr. Cleve and Mr. Smith. And they just had a passion for it. And it came through in their teaching style and sort of what they would generally talk about, like the first, 5 or 10 minutes of the class was just like a little, hey, what's up? Anything new? What's going on in the world? And
in which high school was that?
Lower Secord.
Lower Secord, okay.
And so we would, talk for like 10 minutes about sort of world events and things like that, and then dive into the whatever lesson we was working on. But geography was just one of those things where I just seemed like have a natural affinity for, and just sort of like maybe like the thought processes. And so when high school finished, as circling back earlier, I fully expected to be working at building greenhouses for the rest of my life, and when that didn't really pan out, it was either full time into the music because I was playing in a band at the time, and it was like, well, let's see how far this goes. Like I didn't want to like look back and say what if, and but I made my mom happy, and I sort of applied for the geography program at Brock and was accepted. It's just that I just never bothered to go because number one, didn't have any money for it, and two, it was the music.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I just said to my mom, it's not like I can never go back. Like,
Yeah,
I can do that.
With university's growing,
Yeah.
it's not going away.
So, you know, she was a little upset at that, naturally, and but you know, as sort of time went on, you know, working full time at Bugsy's in St. Catharines, it was it got to that point where is this kind of what I want to do? Like I'm turning, I would have been sort of in my 30s and 40s when I was working at Bugsy's. It's like, is this what I want to? But do I want to be doing the? Not that there's anything wrong with restaurant work or anything.
Great restaurant, corner of lake and lakeshore.
Yeah, but it's just, can I see myself? Is my body going to
appreciate
it, keep up with it, going forward in time?
Yeah.
And it just, you know, I knew that there was time for change, and my work wife, Anne, her and I would get into these conversations about if you could do anything differently, what would it be? And we had both landed on go back to school and get our degrees. And so we essentially challenged each other to do that. And she went to Niagara College. She worked full time for 2 years solid, and went to school full time for 2 years solid. And
I know that pain.
finished with got her accounting diploma or degree or whatever it was. And I had went back to Brock part time. It was kind of like, I'll go back if you go back.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's a better peer pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, hey, I'll jump if you jump.
Yeah, it's like, I'll go back if you go back. And it was, I just happened to have the next day off, and I went up to Brock and to get some information, and I ended up registering to start in January. And wow. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it.
So when was that? Was that maybe the early
2005.
2005, okay. Huh.
Or January 2004.
Oh, okay, because I was just going to ask if we had crossed over, but I started at Brock 2013, so you would have been out of this hulk by then.
Yeah, I finished in 2010. So it took me like, 5.5 years to... Well, I started part-time, and when I realized that I would be like 50 by the time I got my degree, it's like, forget that. I got to step it up. So I worked, full-time as much as I could, and went to school as much as I could. Like for the years that I was part-time, the only month I had off 2.5 years was like July.
Oh, yeah.
For like the 2 years, and it was like 2 courses or whatever. But the interesting thing was the first physical geography course that I had, 1F91, with the awesome professor Darren Platakis. He and I bonded over Black Sabbath's Warpigs, which was fantastic. He had this habit of just cranking music before the lecture, and it was like the first geography lecture that I attended.
So it seemed meant to be.
It was like, oh yeah, I'm home.
Yeah.
Type of thing, right? So, but all of the assignments, because it was sort of on a compressed schedule, you would have a lab due every week.
Well, keep you constant.
Right?
Like, I hate that when you're gone for 2 weeks, you come back.
Yeah. But when I did the human geography, I brought the following year, sort of like the regular sort of system. It was like, assignments were done like every 3 weeks. It's like, what? I got 3 weeks to do this? Like,
yeah, I feel like you could actually take it.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Wow.
So, doing that part-time for a while, and then switched over to full-time just because I needed to get it done.
Yeah.
And then I did the postgraduate GIS program in Niagara College, which is the entire reason why I had to go to Brock.
Wow, just to be able to
just
reach
to be able
that
to
program,
go to
that was the prerequisite.
Yeah, you had to have a degree, bachelor's degree, or you had to have like
probably
requisite
10
skills
years
or like 10 years or 15 years of experience in sort of whatever field that you were working in. And Ian Smith, who was the coordinator at the time, like I would go in and see the thesis projects every summer, and just to hang out and understand what's going on. And I talked to Ian Smith, and I said, "Hey, how do I do this?" And he's like, "Did you finish post-secondary?" I'm like, "Nope." He's like, "Well, you're out of luck until you do that." I said, "Well, I'll see you in a few
Yeah.
years."
Wow. So was he still the professor?
Yeah.
That's
So when I got there, it was like, "Hey, Ian, I told you I'd be here."
I'm back.
And I would go every summer again for the things just to sort of keep up tabs. But so that was my sort of career aspiration up until that point. And geography has just sort of been, it's always a constant. Like I can't even look at things normal. I had never thought of myself as like an ADHD person, but I think a lot of the stuff in the pandemic is, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of like that. They're seeing sides of themselves that they've never really
Well,
appreciated or even noticed before. And,
when you're by yourself, you finally know who you are.
And you sort of slow down a little bit and sort of appreciate more of the.
You're forced to smell the roses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, I started Geospatial Niagara in 2013. I started at the region first, but 2013, there was just a lot of stuff that was happening at the time that sort of made me think that like an educational nonprofit that promotes sort of geographic education and thinking and possibilities of geographic data and such. It just seemed like a good thing because if you were to put in, GIS into Google back in 2013, you would get the region's GIS stuff. You would get the map library.
Nothing that's very user
And
friendly.
you would get the program in that project. Nothing about sort of why it's important, how it's important, like how people can get involved with it. Like you use geography every day, and but they don't really. It's just like a stealth.
Yeah.
Like a ninja.
Yeah, those dots aren't really connected into how this is important or how it affects your life.
Until you take somebody's cell phone away from them and say, "Hey, drive from Niagara on the Lake to Winfrey."
Yeah, that is funny how many people nowadays, people my age, people older, who are like, I don't know how to drive anymore unless I have my maps on me. And like, I'm definitely the kind of person, like, it's funny because I'm not a huge camper. I think it's because I just hate mosquitoes. But I love to go without technology. Like, I'm the kind of person who, remember in university, I would either leave my phone at home, in the car, wherever, just because I remember this one time going to class and my phone had broken, fell off the nightstand and broke. And for the next few days, I had no cell phone. I just had my laptop, so like I was able to use that to message key people, my family, my girlfriend at the time. But otherwise, like I would just sit there in the lecture halls. I remember looking around and like just seeing like all these people on their phones and just like basically like almost like waiting to make eye contact with anyone nearby. I'd be like, "So you want to kill some time? Like 5 minutes to lecture. Like what's your name? Like."
Yeah. Those types of things are funny. I mean, one of the biggest things at Brock when I started, I think I shocked. Like, obviously, I was older student, so I was like a good 20 years older than sort of all the other students. But I think I shocked the professors when after lectures, I would go back to their office
and want to keep learning
and say, "Hey, how's it going?" And can you embellish or elaborate on this or that, or just for my own curiosity's sake. And I think I kind of freaked them out because they're
probably not used to it.
Yeah, because they're not, and just simply doing that, I think students have this sort of thought in their process that the professors are out to get them.
Yeah,
or they're out to like prevent them from getting their degree.
It takes one bad teacher for people to have that wired in them.
And then, but if you go and talk to your professors, like at the beginning of the year, get some FaceTime. Believe me, that comes back handy if you need that extra hour or day of
little
to hang
extension
something
or,
in or whatever, because they're going to give that to you because you've made the effort to talk to them,
yeah,
rather than the guy or gal or whoever
whatever you are.
who has never even gone to a lecture,
Yeah, yeah, and
and then
especially
just sort of
nowadays,
says,
show up
"Hey,
online.
yeah, exactly." So, yeah, we forgot that. It's all online. Now we have this dichotomy of online
Yeah,
and
well,
stuff.
sometimes I remember, so even at Brock, there'd be instances where I knew I had to make that personal connection, and I'd have to kind of brainstorm what's something I could say that shows that I listen, shows that I care, but shows that I like kind of got something more out of it than was at the surface level, or to sort of think like what were they hoping that I would be able to ask more of. And so I remember I felt phony at the same time. It's like I know I don't really care too much, but I want to make that personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
I want to show, and even it's not even like a disrespect thing. It's like I want to respect and show that like I care enough that I want to ask that question that goes beyond the surface level of what you are required or had to teach. So it's almost like it's like stand-up comedy. It's like storytelling. Like you have to be authentic and do it as well. So that was another thing I had to learn. And yeah, it helped out. I mean, even like when I did my master's, it was required. I think it was 2 or 3 academic references I had to give. So I had to go back to my profs at Brock, and I think no, okay, I was in the Niagara region at the time, but I remember going back to Brock and knocking on a few old doors and saying, "Hey, you remember me, of course." So, and luckily, I was also a teaching assistant, so I got to know the professors kind of on that level too.
That's one of the big benefits of what I ended up doing, is because that first geography professor that I had up on the physical geography, I ended up TAing for the physical geography field course for like 10, 12 years.
Wow.
And this is the first year I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
You've heard it here first.
Oh man, always.
I'm retiring from the field course TA position.
For now. Wait till 2024. Who knows what'll come back?
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, so in 2013 I started Geospatial Niagara, and there was really 3 things reasons why I started it. One was there was a CBC news story of a teacher or a professor out east that would give her students a rudimentary geography test coming into first year sociology.
Oh,
so
really?
Blank map of the world. Here's 10 things. Label them on that.
Wow, they can do that. Where's Niagara Falls?
And they're labeling like the Mediterranean Ocean, Mediterranean as like the Atlantic Ocean.
Jeez.
And so there's obviously some kind of an education disconnect there.
A lot of gaps.
There's a gap. The other thing was in Niagara, there was an economic development strategy had just come out, and it was like tourism, transportation, logistics, high-tech manufacturing, and something else. It's agribusiness, I think it was. And I look at all of that, and I'm like, that's all geography. You're screwing with it.
Oh, I know, she's still recording. Just save the time.
So all of these things, all of these sectors are all geography based.
At their core.
At their core. And we have Brock, and we have Niagara College, and like, so why are we not developing and leveraging this sector? Not so much the sectors themselves, but the data sector, the geospatial data sector that these organizations and these sectors run with. Because as the geospatial technology professional, it doesn't matter to me if it's transportation or if it's planning. It's data.
Yeah.
Right? So you might have to spend a little bit more time getting familiarized with the data that you're using, but the processes and the skills that you need to manipulate the data, it's all the same.
Yeah. Well, that's like someone going to a restaurant in another country and trying to say something that they just literally read on a page before without knowing the language. That can get you so far, but as soon as the person replies back to you, you have no idea the underlying language or the data that you need, and so it all falls apart. So I mean, it's funny because we're dealing with that right now, where we want to be able to get right to the core on a lot of things. Like I mean, obviously things have to be high level in order to explain to a larger audience how certain things work, but I think that's really important for people to really get that down to earth, that fun foundational knowledge of how, for example, the economy works, and that's why like I know it seems like a great photo opportunity, but it's really important to even be able to do things like site tours to go see like what is actually like we talk about manufacturing, but what's actually being built here in Niagara as an example, like going right to the source. I'm just gonna so we can see our beautiful faces wiggle this.
I'm gonna pause it. I'll go grab a stronger beer.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, I always just edit out anyways. Thank you, sir. We're not sponsored by Rush or Oast, although they both are delicious, and we are open for solicitation.
Well, that's the Rush is the Henderson's brewery in Toronto. But yeah, so the third thing was my son was in grade 7 at the time, and I asked him what they were doing for Geography Awareness Week, which is like the second week in November, and it's like a National Geographic sort of endorsed and sponsored and developed week of sort of education, I guess you could call it. So I asked him it's like, what's your class doing for Geography Awareness Week? And he just looked at me like I had like 12 heads. And so I thought, well, there's something there's a disconnect between sort of like the world of geography and sort of the teaching of it, and I think the difference is when sort of I was in high school, the teachers that taught you geography were geographers. They had that, they went to university for it. It wasn't like, oh, this is like a second teachable.
I went to school because I want to be a teacher specifically, and I happened to teach geography. It was like, no, I'm by trade a geographer.
Yeah, and the same thing was with math. Like back in the day, they were all, math teachers were mathematicians. Like they went to school for that sort of stuff. And it just seems that, these days, with all of the pressures that teachers have, they have their one thing, and if your one thing doesn't happen to be geography, then that's going to trickle down into the classroom and not motivate students to sort of understand. So Geospatial Niagara sort of exists to bolster and engage those teachers. Like I'm not worried about the 1,000 students that have the awesome geography teacher. I am worried about the 9,000 students that might not.
That could be missing out on.
That could be missing out on opportunities because either the teacher doesn't have the background of it, or the student doesn't have the will to search it out through the teacher or what have you. So, and the other thing too is grade 9 geography is the mandatory geography.
Yes, there probably are a lot of teachers that are just like, hey, we need someone who's going to teach this course.
And I want students to be excited about geography before they get into grade 9. Like I don't like, and I think there's like a huge opportunity in learning, especially like locally. Like how does Niagara on the Lake and Wainfleet work together? Like what are their similarities? What are their differences? Like and those types of things. Because I mean we have our own. The geography of the Niagara Peninsula is so diverse from west to east and north to south. It's like it could be its own country.
Yeah.
And we would have different climates and different.
Well, I mean, same population as all of Prince Edward Island. We could easily be our whole province, Canada alone.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, like you said, just with, especially add in all the different cultures we have, all the 13 different governments we have.
I would say we are probably, forget about Toronto. I think we are the most diverse region in probably all of Canada.
Now, when you say that, do you mean by our soil?
Soil or people. I mean,
Well, I guess you got the French influence in Welland. Um, I mean, you definitely have a lot of like refugees that end up in Fort Erie, which I learned about.
yeah.
The multicultural center down there.
In
The big
74,
friendship center.
75, it was Vietnamese, Vietnamese boat people. I remember being, when I went to church, our church housed, I don't remember how many families, but it was probably at least 5 or 6 families from escaping Saigon and Vietnam War. And then, sort of recently it's been Somali and Afghan and Ukrainian most recently.
Yeah.
And, I think, and I know we're sort of jumping all over the place, but
Yeah, that's okay.
festivals like we have like Folk Arts Festival, which is Canada's oldest continuous sort of cultural festival. Those festivals, attending those festivals as a kid, it was almost like traveling without traveling.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
And it was different than. Here's me yelling at the clouds. But it was at the time that I went, so say the 70s to the 80s, or let's just say 74 to 84. Let's call it that. All of these sort of open houses were run by first generation. Well, not even first generation, like arrival.
Yeah,
immigrants.
fresh off the boat.
Fresh off the boat. So they would gather. Like my father was Lithuanian, and so
my grandparents Sicilian.
We'd go to like the Lithuanian open house and the Estonian open house, and when there was enough of a population, when they could each have their Estonian, Lithuanian, Latvian, 3 separate open houses, and then 3 or 4 years later, 5 years later, now they're all happening at the same time.
And I guess there was scheduling conflicts.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years later, they're gone because the people who started it have retired and moved on. The kids that are first generation Canadians,
they just want to integrate.
They just want to integrate. Yeah. They don't care about. No, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't
Not
appreciate
the same way, yeah.
sort of in the same way as their parents did, and wanted to share their culture with the community. And so I think for me, maybe that's even a lot of the place, like a lot of the piece of me loving geography so much, is because I was able to, I love food, so food's a good thing. I like beer, but I mean, back then it was like 9. But being able to see the dancing and the music and the food, and sort of putting it all together, and then, hey, we're leaving here, and then we're going over here, and it's like now I'm at the Filipino open house, and I'm having an entirely different experience, and it's like, this is incredible.
Yeah, even yesterday I was just at the Cuban Friendship Festival, on Sunday.
Is that within Niagara Falls?
Yep. Yeah. So you are right. I mean, I think it is just okay. I've lived in Ottawa. I've lived in Mississauga. I've lived in Niagara, and I think it's like, so we definitely are overpowered by the Italians. My family, there's definitely a lot of Dutch. There's definitely a lot of Germans, but
even the Dutch open house doesn't even exist anymore for the Folk Arts Festival, and that went. I want to say 2017 or 18. It just got too expensive or whatever. But then you have like the Greek open house, the Greek community. I mean, they have their open houses for Folk Arts Festival, but then they have an entire weekend that they because people packed.
Well,
every day.
I think, like you said, the biggest. I think it's the people come for the food and they stay for the culture. And the food is definitely a draw, especially when you're driving down Niagara Street and you can smell whatever kebabs on the barbecue.
Oh, but it's so awesome to experience that. So I mean, so that's why I started Geospatial Niagara. I wanted to say to students that geography is more than trivia. It's more than longest rivers or most population. Like if you think of geography as an iceberg, the geography that most people assume is like that 10% of the iceberg that's above the water. Whereas true geography, the depth of geography, is that 90% of the iceberg that's below the water that you don't see.
Yeah, you don't even realize.
And you know, you know, people think of geography. You know, there's all kinds of memes. It's like, oh yeah, you're coloring in a map or what have you. But geography sort of displays itself in like lots of different ways. And one of the things I love to bring up is video games, like in terms of maps
Yeah.
or levels of video games. So if I go into a classroom, I'll have a slide in a PowerPoint that'll be like a series of maps, but they're maps taken from Skyrim,
Yeah,
Call of
you get
Duty,
to understand like all the work that
GTA.
goes into how you're moving around
Yeah.
in the video game. All that has to be layered.
Yeah, and then you're using there's still cartographic principles involved, but you're using like graphic design skills.
Artificial geography.
It's artificial geography, and so I think that opens up a lot of eyes to students to say, oh, I don't just have to be a geography teacher. And I think
Yeah.
that was one of the biggest misconceptions.
Well, I always had that thought when I went to economics because it's funny. You're sitting in front of
You wanna go work at a
professor.
bank?
Yeah, yeah. Well, people like want to be a bank teller, and I know some people in my program actually did become a bank teller. But yeah, you can't help it. You're sitting in there in the classroom. You're looking around. Okay, there's 50 of me. There's one econ professor in this room. I guess like 1 out of 50 of us is going to get a job. But yeah, no, that's why it's important to have places like Geospatial Niagara to be able to see that there's so much more behind the scenes. It's just even I look at someone like John Docker, who we know both well, who I'm not sure the exact upbringing of the Niagara Employment Inventory, but just incredible
so
that that data set. So just to give background for anyone who doesn't know, it's a data set of every business that has a front door, a brick and mortar within the Niagara region, and all sorts of data collected through that, through the number of employees they have, whether that's full-time, part-time, seasonal, contract, permanent, understanding the sector of all these businesses. The most important thing is where are these businesses? Which municipality are they in? Literally, what road are they on? What is their exact Y and X coordinate? And with that data goes so far, I know from my experience working at the town of Fort Erie, that was crucial. When COVID-19 hit, we knew where every business was in our town. From the most recent, it was less than 6 months before, we had a catalog of every business in our area. We were able to reach out to each and every one of them, whether by email or phone.
I bet you they appreciated that.
Oh yeah, just to know
even if they didn't even tell you.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't tell you, they appreciate it. I'm certain they appreciate it.
Yeah, me and my colleague at the time, Kirsty, we called every single business in Fort Erie that we knew of. So for anyone who's listening, who's like, I never got a call. Like, sorry. Maybe you're on a dark alley where the team didn't get out to survey you, or maybe you were a new business, maybe you're working from home. No, it was great to have. And it's funny because I have, as you're saying that, I keep thinking in my head, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Same thing with economics. I wish that people were able to learn about economics earlier on in life. I mean, even as simple as making a decision between will I make this trade off of this trading card with a piece of cake that my brother has, or whatever it might be, like that is economics. Like opportunity cost, that is economics. And also with politics, another thing where it's like, all right, trying to be friendly with my brother so that my sister doesn't end up, teaming up on me when it comes time to figure out what TV show. I'm going to help my brother dig this hole or whatever the heck he's doing so that later on he'll vote on my end when it comes to Dragon Ball Z being on TV instead of whatever.
This is the good thing about only having one sibling rather than two.
Yeah, less politics involved. I mean, there's still some game theory there. There's still definitely some tit for tat, making sure, okay, if I want them to behave this way, I will do this now. If I want this, I'll do that.
Yeah. I mean, so the whole geography piece, like I think most people are so disengaged from, like, people don't even know their neighbors, let alone, their geography. I think, when I was a kid, yelling at clouds.
Grandpa Simpson.
Yeah, Grandpa Simpson. It was never even a thought. It's like wake up in the morning, get on your bike, and go.
Yeah.
And no maps, it was just sort of it's sort of like you went on intuition of where you've seen before, and where other people had taken you before, and then you sort of build out this
map in your head.
visualization in your head. And it was one of the coolest little assignments that we did at Brock in the human geography class. Is just sort of do that mental map. You know, when when you're 5, your whole world is your backyard and your front yard, and then sort of where you go with your parents. Like at the time it was like Wilco or Zellers or what have you. When you turn 9 or 8, get your first bicycles or whatever, and now you're becoming friends with the neighbors across the street. So for here it was Gino Francesco across there, Derek and Dave Broombridge down the road, Frank Mazzoni way down there, and it's sort of where we hung out. Gino went to St. Alfred's, Catholic school, and me and the Groombridges went to Lincoln Centennial, the public school. We just hung out, and it was like the coolest thing. So now your map gets a little bit bigger. And then grade 7 hits, and I had to go to Scott Lee, which is way down Scott Street. So I had to start taking a bus. So now I got to learn the bus route and buy bus tickets. And now it's like, what do you mean the bus just doesn't go from here to Scott Lee? It goes like around the city. Like I can get to the Penn Center.
Yeah.
And it's like now your map is even bigger than.
And then you're going to visit your friends at other universities, other towns, and then you finally get a job and you get money to fly to Bangladesh.
And now,
Puerto Rico.
if you tell, I think now if sort of the prevailing thing is it's like, hey, just go somewhere but without using your phone, and now it's kind of this ingrained motion to. I don't even know if it's so much the direction. I think it's a lot of the time. It's the fastest,
most
way
efficient.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, and that's like another piece of geography that people don't, sort of appreciate is sort of the temporal side of geography. This patio moved from over there to over here, and same kind of area, but I think I have more drainage space because these were all cemented together. They were like edge to edge. There were no gaps. So I actually created more rainwater runoff space than was previously. So I don't know what that had to do with anything.
Hey, that's why I love this. Like, it honestly just goes wherever it has to.
We're between two ponds. It's kind of like the new Darren Platakis.
Between two ferns.
Between two ferns. We're between two ponds.
Well, no, I love this, and I know one of these days maybe I'll have to get a fisheye lens to be able to get the whole space within this. But
before we wrap up, we'll just sort of open the door.
Yeah, let it end in there. No, I mean, this is all really cool. I'm glad I know we talked about this a few weeks ago. I'm glad. Thank God we put it in our calendars, or else it probably would have just been like, oh crap, like, oh, that was today.
And there's so much to talk about.
Well, hey, let's make this the first of a series of many, and next time I'll bring some beers down from. So now I'm located mostly in Fort Erie, so yeah. So I live in Fort Erie, right? Like, bought a house last year during the frenzy on Robinson Street, which is right near Jarvis Street in Fort Erie. My girlfriend lives on Queen's Circle, so that's where I spend most of my time these days, down in Crystal Beach. My family is over in Niagara on the Lake, so that's why it's still kind of a perfect Bermuda Triangle to be able to visit. It's within the zone. Later tonight, I'll probably pop in there. Actually going to the Old Angel Inn, again, not a sponsor, tonight to go meet the girlfriend and her parents.
The Angel Inn is probably... I have such a soft spot in my heart for the Angel Inn. I just love it.
According to the NEI, it is the oldest continually running business in the Niagara region. Now,
1786?
Something like that. So
you know how I know that?
Oh.
Is because all the materials that my mom saved in the year-end reviews, they would have like a page of sponsors and then a page of like news or like a backstory of stuff in the day. And all of the sponsors, they would start from the earliest to the most recent, and Angel Inn was always
there.
Always the first.
It's crazy too.
Them and Molson.
Oh wow! Yeah. Like, you always think, like, obviously there's more than, like, the current owners I know have only had it for maybe 5 years, and so just funny when you think of like the building itself has outlasted many lives. Like humans have been born and died owning that place, and that building will continue to be there.
It's one of those things where uh, I don't think I could own it, only because I think the pressure in my head for living up to the reputation would be just far too much for me to handle.
Well, and all the ghosts and demons in there that would haunt you if you went the wrong way.
I wouldn't be so bad with that. I'd like to experience that, to be honest with you. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah.
I think it's like one particular room, I think there is, or two particular rooms.
I haven't seen it, but I heard there was a video recorded upstairs from just security of like all of a sudden a chair just like levitating and then being whipped against the wall. And it started with some staff members downstairs that were like heard bang and were like, "What the heck was that?" And they went and checked the cameras after and saw a chair stumbled across the room. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, the Angel Inn is awesome. Like all of Niagara is just friggin' awesome. Like I can't. Sort of getting back to that ADHD piece that we brushed upon earlier. My mind just seems to run like at a pace that I can't understand. But when I think about stuff in Niagara, like I can't decorate a room to save my life. Like
I'm the same
like
way.
spatial concepts in terms of like a room size, like 56 square feet. I got to decorate.
Still lost.
I'm lost. But put a map of the Niagara region in front of me, and the opportunities just pop off the map. And it's just Niagara, and people may doubt me, I don't know, but Niagara is on the cusp of an entirely different level of existence. There's really no other way to explain that in my mind. We have so much to offer, and there's so much that we don't. It's almost like we're holding our cards back, and it's like we don't want to like show our hand. But if we showed our hand, it would be like Toronto wishes for Niagara.
Right. Well, just the opportunity we have. Like Toronto is already covered from the hundreds of years of it being in existence, of it being the drop-off spot for everyone across the world, including my family who moved to Toronto in the 50s. And Niagara is still a blank slate, and I mean, a lot of that slate, not to say blank, I mean, we want to keep as much as we can of our protected lands, and not to get political in it, but I mean, the Greenbelt's probably pretty nice in the long run when you think about all the land that will be more valuable because it's undeveloped than something that's had concrete poured on it over and over again. And I know there's a lot more to talk about, and I know with some of the exciting things we won't even get into today, but we can leave as a precursor for our next one, which we'll hopefully do in the next few weeks, is to talk about all the work going on with the United Nations and trying to get this area designated as a world
UNESCO Global Geopark.
There it is. You heard it right from Darren.
I'll repeat it again. UNESCO Global Geopark, in case it didn't come over the microphone.
And
because that was kind of soft.
Yeah. Well, again, this is really our trial run here with our cicada friends and any other dogs and neighbors that have popped in the back. But I think we've hit just about an hour, which is usually my sweet spot for these sort of things. Nice. So, Darren, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here in your beautiful yard. And yeah, honestly, here, we'll do that again for a sec, just so we can use one of these as a photo for when we do this on YouTube or whatever. Vimeo, yeah, or Rumble or whatever weird website we uploaded this to. But for anyone who's still here, I know some people use this as like kind of background noise. If you're cooking, they just want to hear a conversation in the back, or for anyone who's genuinely into it, thanks for staying all the way till the end.
If you, I'm going to do like a shameless plug right now.
Absolutely.
If anybody just wants more information about Geospatial Niagara or myself as just a geographer that does what he does, Darren Platakis at gmail.com, and maybe we'll just go for a walk and hike one day and just start talking geography.
All right.
No subject matter, just tie everything together from beginning to end.
That'd be awesome. Well, this is hopefully the first of many to come. That would be interesting. Like anyone who's actually watched all of these, I've got maybe 90 subscribers, if that.
If 5 of you
Yeah, if
email
even
me.
5. And like, I have no theme for this. I have no set podcast studio, whether it's my living room, my parents' backyard, or Darren's shed.
This may be the first of many from the shed.
Yeah, one day we'll be in the shed. Now, what's inside here, Darren won't legally let me see, but one day we'll know. But all right, thanks to anyone who's watching. And again, Darren Platakis. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And you know me.
Thanks, everyone.
Right, take care, anybody.
Ciao.